This piece called Paper Towel, and it's set in the sort of late 19th century. It's by an upper-class family. Mr. Eversley liked to cut faces in his spare time. He liked odd ones best, ones with pudgy cheeks, beak noses, or Dickensian beards that grew square-shaped. He would hold up a small black card and a pair of fine scissors and glance at the guests in the drawing room. Then he would cut. Meanwhile, the sitters would tug at their collars and try to stay still. "Done," Mr. Eversley would announce, peeling away the sliced image. His guests would gawp at the exact shadow of themselves, betwixt his fingers. They would murmur praises and touch the perfect outline of their own nose, the curve of their hairline, or their jutting chin on black card. Their eyes lit up in childish delight at recognizing their own face. Mr. Eversley's daughter, Effie, understood this emotion well, and loved to fold her arms over the top of her father's armchair and watch him work. She was her papa's biggest fan. She had been since she was 8 years old, and had one day wondered out loud where children came from. Her mother spluttered and stopped, as though she'd swallowed a fishbone. Mr. Eversley paused. He wended away to his study, a cloudy look in his eyes. He reappeared in the drawing room before bedtime, cradling a paper tulip the size of his hands, and ordered the scullery maid to fetch a bowl of water. He asked Effie to settle down beside him. "Once," said Mr. Eversley, "there was a man who greatly desired a child, but did not know where to find one." Mrs. Eversley snorted here, but her husband paid her no mind. He searched all over town, but to no avail, until one day he was given a tulip and told to plant it. Effie tipped her head to one side. "But this was no ordinary tulip," said Mr. Eversley. He dropped the paper flower into the water bowl. It ducked and slid along the liquid before settling in the centre. "Watch," said Mr. Eversley. The corners of his eyes crinkled. Effie loomed over the bowl. The water tickled the flower. It yawned and unfurled its petals to present a small roll of paper curled up in the middle. As the petals opened, the paper curl stretched out tiny arms and legs and became the shape of a girl. "It's me," Effie gasped. And it was. The silhouette had her long, sloping nose, her little pointed chin, and her curls tied up in a ribbon. "Yes," her father said. "You wish to know how you came to us. You did so in a flower." "Isn't that one of Mr. Anderson's stories?" Mrs. Eversley accused. "It's an adaptation," said Mr. Eversley. "And where did you find me, Papa?" cried Effie, still looking at the girl in the tulip. "I fought a witch to get you." Effie giggled. Mrs. Eversley scoffed. "And I suppose I did nothing." More paper puppet shows were to come after the first, each one more intricate than the last. There was Peter Pan, who wore a tunic of tiny paper skeleton leaves, made jagged with the edge of a blade. He was attached to a string so that he could swoop over Effie's tulip boat and ask her if she were a fairy that had lost her wings, since she was so small. "Come with me, and we shall sail your tulip boat across the mermaid lagoon. Then I shall teach you how to fly," said Mr. Eversley, in a thin boy's voice. He sat beside Effie on the drawing-room floor, legs sprawled, hair dishevelled. Effie did not think he made a very convincing Peter, but she did not mind. She cried when her paper tulip wilted. The petals drifted apart, and her doll sank to the bottom of the bowl. It tore when she lifted it, and crumbled between her fingers. The next day, her father conjured a new doll for her to play with, and she was soon smiling again. She tugged him towards the drawing room, clamouring for his stories. "I don't know why we even have a nursery," said Mrs. Eversley. The silhouettes all ended up in Mr. Eversley's study eventually. As Effie grew older, she was no longer permitted to play with the dolls. Marie's love for the Nutcracker Prince was only charming on stage, her mother said. However, Mr. Eversley allowed his daughter to look at the dolls in his study. They dangled from strings attached to the ceiling in a shower of fairy tale scenery. Effie liked to sneak in at dusk and watch them glow blue in the moonlight. They swayed when she touched them and cast a painting of living shadows on the floor. Her father's favourite, Peter, stayed by the window, under a cluster of stars. There was also a zoetrope of Effie's. The wheel of paper girls held hands and whirled slowly in a ring. They began as a Thumbelina-sized Effie and gradually got taller, then stopped at 16 and spun abruptly back into a child.